And well, to bring the worlds together, bringing brands and the Internet of Things together, we have the proud privilege to welcome amidst us our next speaker and the man behind the first agency dedicated to connecting brands and consumers via the Internet of Things. So please put your hands together and very warmly welcome at Goa Fest 2018, the founder, SharpEnd, Mr. Cameron Worth.
Cool. Hello, everybody. Everyone hear me at the back? Good levels? All right. I move around a lot less than the last speakers, but I'll also try and be about half the time as well. So you give and you get. So thank you very much to Mr. Jaideep Gandhi for inviting me to speak at Goa Fest. It's given myself and my girlfriend the privilege of spending 2 weeks in Goa. So since then, I'm about 25 years older and about 7 shades darker. I speak regularly at a lot of events around technology innovation, how brands are using new forms of engagement to deliver value. And I can say, I was speaking at Cannes last year, and you guys are definitely on the right track. There's a really nice festival vibe, a lot of smart people here, and it's a privilege to take part. So I'm going to try and take about 15 minutes, and I'm going to try and take you through what is a pretty confusing world. The other thing to bear in mind is I am from London, so I don't pronounce T's, and I do speak very quickly. Although I have been impressed at the speed at which Indians are able to speak English at me, because you've actually been able to confuse me quite a few times. So I appreciate that. So to give you one slide about SharpEnd, and there are screens here, which I never take advantage of. But to give you an idea about who SharpEnd is, it's an agency that I started 3.5 years ago. We're based in London and Stockholm, and hopefully we're going to be launching in New York and potentially an Asian operation towards the end of this year. It's a 3.5-year-old agency that specializes in the Internet of Things. So I developed the world's first agency dedicated to IoT. You can see that we've been on a very successful few years working with a lot of big brands. And I'm really going to take today to not really talk about us, but really just talk about some of the stuff that brands are doing so that you guys can be a little bit interested and inspired by what technology innovation can do, away from just advertising and messaging people and actually into about how brands behave differently in connected spaces. I have a famously short attention span, so what I always try and do, when I go to these events, I lose interest after about 5 minutes. So what I always try and do for the people who are like me in the audience is land the first 3 points, or kind of land the main 3 points early on. And then if you guys stop listening, then at least you've tried to get something from my talk. I think the third one is particularly important, especially with what you just saw previously, is kind of there's a very, very broad stroke appeal you can take to digital and technology and innovation, but actually I'm a much more focused, much deeper specialist when it comes to the Internet of Things and kind of technology innovation in general. And I really believe that if you look at what's happening with the agency landscape, that people who are gaining traction in brands are not the big kind of new digital agencies, they're the specialist agencies that focus on a particular segment within this new landscape. And I really feel like over the next few years that's going to take precedence. The other thing that I always try and sort of hammer home is whenever you speak to anyone about the Internet of Things, a lot of people will always talk about a fridge, and they'll always talk about the fact that this fridge orders milk. And then someone who's a bit more of an alpha male and generally not a very likable person, if you get to know them, I've always found, is that they'll talk about their fridge orders beer because they drink beer and they watch football and all that kind of stuff. And after working in this space for 3.5 years, I'm very, very tired of that use case, and I struggle a lot to laugh at the same joke. So what I'll try and do today is show you some case studies of actually way that brands are using the Internet of Things, so that if you're having the conversation about the IoT, then you'll be able to talk about some actually really valuable use cases versus the one that everyone else is talking about. And I'm sure you've all noticed there's about 500 LinkedIn blog posts a day about the IoT, and I'd say about 99% of them mention the fridge and the milk. So if everyone could stop doing that, I'd appreciate it, if any of you are guilty of that. The Internet of Things is a very, very buzzy topic, as I'm sure you all know. The Internet of Things mean everything and nothing at the same time. So what I want to try and do is break it down from a brand marketing perspective in one slide, which is a pretty tall order. Ultimately, it's this. As the world is becoming more connected, the screens are disappearing. So if you think about what happened with digital advertising, the screens were big enough to ignore the adverts. And then mobile advertising became a bit more interruptive. It didn't really have the same sort of cut-through because the device is a lot more personal. People don't really appreciate splash screens as they're playing stuff like Candy Crush or whatever. But what we're now approaching as you look at things within the IoT and brand marketing is that actually the screen sizes aren't carrying advertising. So if you could tell me how to put a brand logo on an Apple Watch or put a TV ad on the Amazon Echo, I think that starts to tell you the world that we're entering. And that's really what I think about when I talk about the IoT and brands. You've got the IoT and manufacturing, operations, Industry 4.0, as I said previously, but yeah, I leave that to Boston Consulting Group and McKinsey and the other kind of slightly more sooty and boring people. I focus on the fun stuff. And I guess if you look at, I think what I always try and do is think about the way that the brands, or the role of brands has shifted with these new kind of platforms. Digital allowed brands to just pump their message out. So here's my product, it's amazing, here's a website, and I'm going to tell you that 500 different ways. Social and mobile, which was Web 2.0, really changed the role of brands because consumers could talk back. Or they could say, well, why is your product great? Or I don't think your product's great. Or I think your product's very bad. And brands really needed to look at that and say, okay, well, what do we stand for in this world where we can actually now have to have consumers, conversations with consumers? The Internet of Things, as I see it, which is Web 3.0, is a world where you can plug context into the conversation. So rather than just knowing who the person is, you can now know where the product was consumed, how they consumed it, what did they do alongside the product, how many times have they bought it before, what location are they in, what are the different variables that you can add into the conversation. So really it's gone from brands just pushing themselves out to then having to speak back, and now they're having to have very informed conversations at scale. So really what we've done is we've plugged context into the conversation, and that's really the way that I think of the Internet of Things. And I'm here all day, so if you guys want to pick my brains afterwards, by all means, but I tried to just do it in 2 slides, and I've promised Jaideep I'm going to hurry up today, so I won't go into it too much. But I guess this is the question, right, which is if my platforms have changed and if my screens are disappearing, how do I tell my brand story? And that's really, I think, where Sharpend started, which was kind of trying to answer that question for brands. And I think the answer lies in three different things, which is, I'm still trying to work out where the computer is. Product, service, and experience design that's driven by connectivity. So when you plug context or the ability to connect or look at service design based around connectivity into product, service, and experience design, there's really 2 things that happen. One is you get more insights about your consumers and your products. The second thing is obviously what you do with those insights, but we'll take that maybe next year. And then from a revenue perspective, does technology innovation help me sell more of my product, or does it help me generate more loyalty with my consumers? And I actually think it's much more the latter. If someone buys your product, normally that's the end of the relationship right now. Actually now, if you look at the IoT and with the use cases that I'll talk to you about now, this is really looking at actually that becoming the start of the conversation. So if I can start to speak to people through my products, then I stop advertising to them, because now it's just a case of making sure I speak enough and I say the right stuff to make them want to keep buying my product. And now we'll go into some use cases. So the main areas that I see the Internet of Things playing a role for brands, which are the 3 focus areas of Sharpend, is smart packaging, which is turning products into digital media touchpoints. So any product that you have in the world that you buy or use is able to be interacted with now via the smartphone. And that's a real focus area for Sharpend, and I'll show you a case study in a second. Smart spaces, so how do you make retail more fun? How do you make the home more interesting? How do you make the shopping experience generally a bit more seamless? How do you use connectivity as part of that? And then connected products. So how do you expand your product portfolio looking at connected object design? So for example, if I am an infant formula brand, is there a weight measurement device that I can associate with my product that is then going to help mums be able to dose the baby correctly? And how does that bring benefit to both the consumer and my brand and my business? So the first case study I wanted to show you is some work that we did for Malibu Rum. This was the world's largest deployment of NFC in FMCG and CPG. It was 50,000 bottles in 2016. The insight here was how do we learn more about our consumers via our products. So NFC, if anyone doesn't know it, is a small chip that you can place onto any object. It's an adhesive tag that you can stick anywhere. You tap it with your smartphone and it launches online content. So you can see here quickly how Malibu looked at using that technology.
Tap the bottle's sunset to launch the app and connect. Snap your #BecauseSummer moment and upload for the chance to win an unforgettable experience in Barbados. You can find a local hotspot or cool off at home with our refreshing drinks recipes. Listen to summer playlists with your friends, play Shake Your Coconuts to win a speaker, and express yourself with our emojis. See you in Barbados!
So you can see here that with smart packaging and with the Internet of Things, the product isn't just a bottle of rum anymore, it's a bottle of rum that's also filled with digital services. So I can win competitions, I can find out how to make more use of the product, I can find local bars that make good Malibu cocktails, and at the same time the brand gets a huge amount of data now on where their products are, what consumer bought them, and how can they use that data more intelligently in the future is something that we're now working on as we start to scale this program up. So that's smart packaging. Smart Spaces is looking at the customer experience and looking at how connectivity can drive more value. So this is a prototype that we developed for Nordic Choice, which is a large hotel group in Scandinavia. And we're now in the process of going to be piloting these solutions. This is also when my hairstyle was at its dodgiest. I've gone through a few, so I apologize in advance. But this is really looking at the hotel customer experience and looking at how sensors and new forms of signage can be used to just add a bit more value to the overall guest experience.
I think overall the customer experience is transforming everywhere, whether it's in retail, whether it's in a bar, whether it's in a nightclub, or whether it's in a hotel. And I think the main driver around the shift in customer experience is technology. As you know, every attendee has a name badge. So if I then place your entrance card against this reader, you'll see here that it's able to personalize the content based on who it now knows you are. Each glass is fitted with what's called an NFC tag. The bar top will then recognize that it is a White Russian that's on the screen, and it will be able to tell the story of the cocktail as the drink is being prepared.
So that was a prototype we've done. The reason it looks a bit crappy is because it was a prototype, and we're a big believer in not spending much money in the first instance. In terms of what that looks like as a pilot, using RFID on the hotel key cards, we're able to take up to about 50 meters the guest's name, and it basically wraps their name onto a bottle. So every hotel key card, including the ones at the Grand Hyatt, contain your guest information, your first name and your last name and your room number, and you can actually take that data and you can use it to do interesting stuff. So now we're making, instead of Absolute Vodka, it might be Absolute Cameron, and it's just a nice shareable way to greet people at hotels. Connected products, this is probably the one that you guys will find most interesting and fun. Working off the insight that people don't like queuing, we looked at how could you transform an existing trade marketing asset for Malibu, which was the coconut cup. So we supercharged it with electronics, and as a result, we were able to eliminate the need for queuing at a very popular nightclub in Ibiza called Ibiza Rocks as part of a small pilot. So here's a good video for that. I was pretty happy when I came up with that idea as well. Yeah. So hopefully now, instead of talking about fridges, you can talk about consumer products that can speak directly to consumer smartphones and deliver personalized stuff. You've got hotel key cards that can be used to greet guests in new and interesting ways in hotels. And you've got coconuts that can reorder alcohol, which is a pretty good world. I think I'm on the right track when I can make people not have to queue in nightclubs, because obviously me and my girlfriend are pretty party heads. So we're always thinking about how we can make our lives a bit easier with technology. That's one of them. So I'm going to spend probably, I reckon, 2 minutes. Just basically, rather than preaching at you and saying this is, why you should be doing X, Y, or Z, I wanted to just talk to you about the approach that we take, and hopefully if there's any agency guys or any brands in the audience, you can start to see, I think, the way that creativity should be evolving and how you end up at results like this. I think there's a few guiding principles. The first one is no workshops. I don't know if anyone's ever been in a productive workshop before, but I think they take a lot of time, they cost a lot of money, and I think ultimately the reason you have workshops is so everyone can high-five mediocre ideas. So I think best thing to do is just make sure everyone's educated on what technology it is that you're going to be working with. Involve everyone, and when I say you, client, team, and real users, I want to put emphasis on real users. They're the people who know what they want from a brand, better than you guys just making theories in a boardroom. Creative is a mindset and not a job title. I think as a new agency and a kind of new kid on the block, I think we've got an excuse to be able to try things differently, and we don't really charge for ideas. I also don't believe in hiring people who are creatives and the briefing process of writing a brief and then giving it to these 2 or 3 people who are deemed special, because ultimately everyone has ideas, and actually the idea, in my opinion, is the easiest part of the creative process. So involve everyone. The fact I see this kind of Internet of Things and technology innovation stuff as slightly generational. And I think it's kind of mandated on people of my generation to really understand and embrace these new technologies, and I don't think that siloing off creativity is a way to achieve that. And then the fourth point is about prototyping. So don't spend much money on these programs. If you're looking at new technology, don't work with a massive agency and spend £30,000 on this big creative deck ahead of doing these massive user flows. Spend a bit of time brainstorming some ideas, sketching them out, building really, really shitty prototypes ahead of just really understanding in the physical sense what these opportunities are, and then looking at scaling those up. So in terms of the rough creative process, very, very straightforward, and I'll just show you how we mapped it against the Malibu connected bottles pilot. So the first thing is brainstorming. What we wanted was a type brief. What problem were we trying to solve here? The first one was that we want to activate Because Summer in a new and interesting way, which is their key campaign. And the second thing was that we wanted to know more about our bottles. So it was a type brief. We involved Malibu consumers who are called Young Fun Starters based on the brand's kind of strategy. And we looked at, rather than trying to be just entertaining and fun, we actually looked at how can Malibu be useful. And I think when you look at service design and connectivity, I think there's a lot more opportunities to be useful versus interesting. So for example, looking at situation, motivation, and outcome statements, everything should be delivered via an insight. So when I want to, so I can. If I could implore you guys to try anything, it's first of all look at your brands and say, okay, well if we were going to be useful and we are going to solve pain points, just write a couple of these down. When I want to, so I can. Do it from the user's point of view and see what you come out with. The second thing is sketch them out. Don't do massive user flow mapping immediately. Just start thinking about, okay, well, how can I get more people interested in the ideas? And it's a pen and paper job rather than an Adobe InDesign job, in my opinion. The third thing is prototype. So for all of our brands that we work with, we build prototyping labs that we manage for them on an ongoing basis. So what you can see here on the left-hand side is the smart packaging lab space that we've got in Stockholm for the Absolute company. And that really just serves as a way that we can just invite people in, allow them to get hands-on with prototypes, not have to spend that much money, not have to spend that much time, and then suddenly, you've got markets that are saying, I love that technology, I want to pilot that at scale, and then you end up with, again, like I said, some good results, so like the world's largest deployment of NFC by a consumer brand. That was kind of really just a very, very high-level overview of the way that we approach things. And then to summarize, if I had to kind of just leave you with any points, first one is that obviously you've seen the brand logos you work with, you've seen the kind of work that we do. Brands are investing in technology innovation at scale, so you're going to see some huge deployments of smart packaging over the next few months. We're just currently writing the press releases. Consumers are connected, so we should be too as brands. You know, as brands, you live in culture. If the culture is now built around connectivity, then you obviously need to be in that new culture. And the third one is just really start looking at prototyping processes and try and look at how you can deliver technology innovation pilots without spending much money at all. And that's really, I guess, my points. So, did it within 20 minutes. Yeah. Good. All right.
Thank you very much, Cameron. Ladies and gentlemen, to moderate this session, may I please invite on stage the chairman of the Award Governing Council to ask the relevant questions, which are from our audience, to Mr. Ajay Kakkar, to please ask the questions to Cameron, please. Welcome, Mr. Kakkar. Yeah, ladies and gentlemen, don't be shy. Please put your hands together.
Fantastic.
Thank you.
Sorry, I'll speak quickly. This is where you find out I don't know what I'm talking about when I go off script as well.
So Cameron, thanks a lot. There was a lot to say, and you said it so concisely and so quickly. You helped us make up for lost time.
I think when you're from South London, you learn how to think about things in the fewest amount of words. So it's one of the few benefits of growing up in a tower block.
Just loved your thoughts on the creative brief. Malibu was a great example. I have a lot of questions, but I'm not allowed to ask them. Brevity of time, so let me start with what the audience has asked. So it is Malibu which starts the questions. Refer to Malibu rum. Are we not trying to divert customer attention from the product to the advertisement, wherein product name and USP becomes dependent on the contest only?
I think there's one of those sayings where the product is the medium in the age of the IoT, and if the product carries the message and it delivers the value, then actually it also becomes the service as well. I think rather than trying to take the thought process away from the product, which would be counterintuitive as a brand, I think what instead we're trying to do is create this new sort of cognitive preference with Malibu, which is twofold. One is I enjoy the product more because I get more out of it. But the second thing is that when I approach the retail environment again, and I'm trying to figure out which rum to buy, I now remember that there was all of these other digital layers that I got as well as the physical product itself. So I think it's trying to develop new USPs. And I also think from our perspective, from Sharp End, we've been able and we've been fortunate enough to work with some really, really renowned brands within this new space. The Internet of Things wasn't something for brands when I started the agency, and now we've been able to really develop some concrete examples. And ultimately what we're trying to do is work with lighthouse brands who can really show the entire drinks industry as a result that smart packaging can be useful, and look at the way we've done it, and then hopefully everyone else can do it. Because equally, at the same time a different alcohol brand does smart packaging, that creates more awareness of the technology, which then benefits all the other brands who are doing smart packaging as well. So it kind of balances out the competition a little bit. Make sense?
How soon do you think we can see IoT reaching the masses, but commercially viable usage of IoT?
Yeah, but I think that's, again, that kind of comes back to my issue with the term IoT. It's something that kind of served Sharp End very well for 3 years. But, I mean, when you say mass market applications of the IoT, if you're looking at smart packaging and you're looking at NFC technology, you know, it's coming. But then if you also look at sensor-driven environments, they're already here. Or if you look at the contactless transport network, which could also be deemed IoT, that's already here as a mass market application. So I think rather than that question having a broad stroke answer, I think instead what you need to do is really deconstruct the question and say, well, what area of IoT are you actually referring to? That would be my response.
I'll take the last one. Could you tell us of one prototype that failed? And
I can tell you lots of prototypes that failed. Yeah, we did one actually, yeah. I'd like to talk about this one. I like talking about stuff that didn't work. We were looking at retail innovation for one of our brands, and we came up with an idea that you can walk past the shelf, and as you walk past the shelf, it uses sensors to not just deliver messaging to you, but it also tracks you with the movement. So if you're walking this part of the shelf, and then it lights back, and then the closer you get to the product, the brighter the lights get. And that all sounds very, very good, and that's why you sketch it out, and then you get your luminous pen, and you like get it brighter, and you're like, fuck, this is genius. And then you build it and you realize that retail environments are actually really well lit. So by the time you actually build it as a prototype, it doesn't actually make any impact whatsoever. And that's the difference between us learning that in Tesco than building it in our office and spending 3 days making a prototype and then the client saying, well, at least we tried it. And that's, I think, where brands like working with us, because we look at how we can really prove something in the real world in as quick a time as possible with as little money. And then when a brand spent 3 days looking at a solution that they were excited about and then getting to our office and seeing it and going, yeah, we agree, that's pretty poor. That actually builds the trust that they have in us anyway. So it's a really nice thing to be able to actually do stuff wrong with brands because they know we're doing it for the right reasons and we're doing it honestly.
So lots in the audience, lots of questions. I think they're going to catch you offline and keep you away from your girlfriend for a while. We give them an opportunity to ask you questions offline. But in the meantime, if you can choose a winner from these 3 questions, we had Malibu.
Third one, failure.
Sorry?
Failure. Everyone should always press people like me about failures.
So
stop talking about successes. Stop talk about the stuff that went wrong. That's more useful. And don't talk about how smart you are. Talk about the work you're doing instead. That's always the mantra.
So does Madhubanti Datta want to come on stage for a question? And there's a check coming your way, I'm assuming.
There's a plaque coming your way. We'll figure out how you are going to encash that money. Congratulations, young lady, on your question. It's amazing how I call everyone young lady. Ha ha. Congratulations, ladies and gentlemen. For that session, let's have a collective loud round of applause for everyone on stage. Thanks, Cameron. And before you leave, Mr. Kakkad, may I please request you to hand over a token of appreciation, a memento. See? She's like, nah, you keep the money. I just wanted the picture. May I please request the team to bring the memento to be presented to Cameron, ladies and gentlemen. With the end of this session, we take a stride forward towards our next knowledge seminar. Thank you, gentlemen.